political intrigue, real-time strategy RPG combat, you must be talking about one game in particular, and that is the DioField Chronicle, which takes all these elements and fuses them together, but is it worth checking out? Hi, I'm Ryan Turford from Carpool Gaming, and this is the DioField Chronicle in review. Huge thank you to our friends at Square-Enix for providing us a code for the DioField Chronicle for the purposes of this review. I played the game on Xbox Series X, but I also tried on Xbox Series S as well, and I've got a couple things to say about that when we get to the visual segment of this review. Now, the story of the DioField Chronicle tells the story of three kingdoms: the Kingdom of Alantane, the Trovalt-Strovian Empire, and the Rowan-Tail Alliance, fighting over a substance called Jade, which grants magical powers. You play as a group of three friends who decide to form their own mercenary group, and when they save an Alatanian duke, they are recruited by the kingdom for a variety of missions. And they also call themselves the Blue Foxes throughout the story. That's the name they come up with. It's very exciting. Throughout the story, you'll also recruit a plucky band of other characters as well that have different classes and attributes associated with them, and they come from all kinds of walks of life. But the story in the DioField Chronicle is very much a politically focused story. It focuses a lot on the fantasy medieval kind of politics going on between these three nations, but as well as some of the turmoil that's happening within the Alatanian Empire. Again, if you're used to stuff like Game of Thrones or Fire Emblem, I think you're going to be right at home with the story in this game. At the same time, I like the story a lot. I do like the fact that it goes in some different places and some interesting places, but I know that there was a lot of twists and turns that I easily saw coming, that I could definitely predict, even before they happened. But there were genuine surprises in the story as well. And I do think it's well written. I think it's well acted by the characters as well, by the actors that are on display here. At least the English voice acting, I did play it with English voice acting versus Japanese storytelling, and I do think a lot of that was well done. So all in all, I like the story for this game. It also doesn't, overstay its welcome at all. You can finish the game in about 20 hours. My final playtime on normal difficulty was just over 24 hours on Xbox. But I know that there was a lot of idling there, and I actually went back and recaptured some elements as well for some of the video that you're seeing throughout this video. So I actually think if I didn't focus a lot on that stuff, I actually think I probably could have beaten the game in about 20 hours. And that actually includes every single side quest in the game as well, because I finished all the side quests. I finished all the main quests. I basically 100%ed this game. So I really, really enjoyed what I played of the game, which we'll transition to now, because I really love the combat. I think that's the thing that really stands out about the DioField Chronicle and what really separates it from a lot of other RPGs, because we don't really have other RPGs that are like this. So the DioField Chronicle takes the strategy RPG formula that we see in games like Fire Emblem or Shining Force, but instead of it being, turn-based and grid-based, where your characters are moving along, instead it's playing like a real-time strategy game, almost like a StarCraft or a Halo Wars or like a Rome Total War kind of experience, where you have four members of the Blue Foxes on the battlefield, and they also are able to pair up with four of your party members that you collect throughout the game, and that allows those characters to then use abilities from the character that they're paired up with, even though they don't appear in the battle with them. And you basically order them around the map to then, take out, certain outposts. Like sometimes you'll be capturing towers or taking out cannons or just killing all the enemy troops that are on the battlefield. But it feels kind of like playing like a real-time strategy game. But then when you want to use the actions for each of the characters, because all of your characters have abilities associated with each of their characters, it actually pauses the game in order for you to do that. It feels almost like, issuing orders in something like Mass Effect, but you're doing that in like a real-time strategy game. So again, very unique combat system, one that, again, we just don't really see in a lot of, I don't know of another RPG that really does this besides like some of the older, Tactics Ogre games were kind of similar in this vein. But for the most part, this is a very unique experience as far as, modern strategy role-playing games. And honestly, I really dug it. Combat positioning is very important in the DioField Chronicle. I love the way that if you are able to position the enemies correctly, you can then deal extra damage to the enemies, or likewise, if you poorly position your troops, they can deal extra damage to you. I love kind of the push and pull that comes along with that. And the way I actually felt about playing the game, especially with the way that each of the classes are set up, because there's 8 classes in total and they fit into kind of different roles in the party, it almost felt like I was conducting my own little MMO party, where I would usually have like a sword and board tank character that would draw the aggro from the enemies, so they would attack her specifically. So then my damage dealers could get behind the enemies and it could attack them and use all their special abilities. And then usually I would have, my spellcaster would also be, my healer as well, because usually I would have them pair up with one of the healer characters, and then they'd have access to all the magical spells in addition to all of the healing spells at the same time. I thought that it was really well balanced and cool. However, the one downside to this combat system is towards the end of the game, I actually found the combat to be a little too easy because, once I had my core group kind of set up, I never felt like any pressure to really change up my characters at all, because each of the characters don't really have like anything unique to them specifically besides their personalities, or in the skills. Each character has like a passive skill that's unique to them, but even then I didn't really feel like a lot of these were powerful enough really for me to want to switch out like Izzy for Catherine, which is the other tank. Like I didn't feel like I wanted to use one over the other, besides the fact that I just like Izzy's personality better. So, and towards the end of the game, you get some really like overpowered abilities that just do, I think, a little too much damage, and then allows you to get through the game a little bit quicker than I was kind of hoping for. Especially the pacing too for battles, because one of the cool things about this game, which again just goes back to what I was talking about with the runtime for this game, all the battles in this game you can finish in less than 5 minutes. In fact, there's actually, each mission gives you rewards depending on what the objectives are on the mission. And one of the rewards will usually be based off of how quickly you can finish the mission. Sometimes it's beat the mission in 4 minutes. Sometimes it's beat the mission in 6 minutes, or even the longer missions, it's like beat this mission in 8 minutes and you'll get a reward, which is just really, really cool. A lot of times it rewards you with abilities to either unlock new weapons for your characters or unlock new skills for your different classes, or, unlock new skills for your summons, because you are able to collect energy on the battlefield, which allows you to then summon these big beasts. The first one you actually get is Bahamut, and it looks awesome. Each one of them actually has like a different set of attributes and pluses and minuses that they bring with you as well, because you're only able to equip 2 in battle. And all of them do different things. So you kind of have to select them beforehand, knowing kind of what battle you're going into, which I just feel like it added just an extra layer of strategy to the whole thing. So the combat itself, just really fast paced and fun. Yes, the console controls are a little bit wonky to get used to because, as you can imagine, controlling characters in a real-time strategy game on consoles can be a little unwieldy at times. But honestly, like in the first 20 minutes, I had the controls down pat, and I did not have a problem with the controls beyond that point. But I know that I've heard other people chatter about how the controls just didn't do it for them, in which case I would recommend that at that point, you're probably better off maybe playing this on PC because you have mouse and keyboard controls. There is no mouse and keyboard support for consoles, so you can play it there as well. And if you want that mouse and keyboard kind of traditional, real-time strategy experience, I think probably PC is the way to go. But combat itself is amazing in DioField Chronicle. Like, I really, really enjoyed the combat in this game. Visually, I think the game looks pretty good as well. It has like its own certain, 3D style to it, where it almost feels like you're playing on a battlefield with a bunch of different miniatures, if that makes any sense, or at least that's what the buildings kind of remind you of, because every time before you start a match, they have like this big overhead of the town that you're in, or the valley you're in, or whatever setting your characters are fighting in at that point. And all of the buildings, for example, in the town look like they're little buildings that you would have in like a dollhouse or something like that, or like a Christmas village nativity set or something like that. So I do like the look of this game as well. The spell effects look really good as well. I always really I didn't really get tired of any of the spell effects, even the ones that transition into their little cinematics. I never felt like I needed like a skip cinematic button or anything like that, because they visually were very appealing as well. As far as the visuals are concerned, when you're comparing, Series X to Series S, you do get a little more flexibility with the Series X version of the game, because you have 3 visual modes: full HD, which just plays the game at ultra settings on 1080p, or you can play on 4K with prioritizing frame rate or prioritizing the visual design. You know, if you prioritize the frame rate, it plays at 60 frames per second and it still looks really good in 4K. Like that's personally the mode that I enjoyed the most. Whereas if you play on like the quality mode, it does run at 30 frames per second, which again, since it is a real-time strategy game in specifics, like the frame rate does matter a little bit. So I'd recommend either full HD or prioritize frame rate if you're playing on Series X. As far as Series S, you've only got, you know, full HD or prioritize frame rate for 4K. But the prioritized frame rate for 4K on Series S only runs at 30 frames per second. So it tries to, you know, keep it as close to, you know, 30 frames per second, but it, you know, will sometimes shoot over that every once in a while, you know, depending on what you're doing. And it looks really nice because it essentially takes the 4K image and then super samples it down to 1080p because you are playing on a 1080p console. Or again, if you have a 4K TV, it'll actually play in 4K. But the full HD mode is definitely the way I'd recommend for Series S. And in fact, if you're watching the video version of this video, all of the video for this version is actually taken from Series S with the full HD visual style. Otherwise, the audio, again, going back to the voice acting, I think the voice acting is great in this game. I will say it was kind of annoying in some of the battles because when you kill some of the enemies, they'll have the same voice line for every single enemy that dies on the battlefield. And sometimes when you're killing 20 or 30 troops in the span of, you know, 5 minutes, it can get kind of dull and you could definitely get very repetitive. So, you know, I think the sound had some goods and bads. I like the music in this game though as well. Like it is more of this like orchestral kind of classical style stuff that's more akin to, you know, Final Fantasy Tactics or something like that. And I totally think that the music itself was really good in this game. Sound effects were great and everything else. So nothing bad to report on the sound side besides some repetitive voices. And all in all, honestly, as someone who loves strategy RPGs, I actually really liked this game a lot. Like I found it very hard to put this game down. I can understand though that it does feel a little bit unpolished at times. And I wish there was just more, you know, subsystems you could deal with, especially with interacting with your troops, because a lot of times with the side missions, you'll, you know, walk and talk to someone in your base, and then it'll have this like thing where they talk about the person's past for a couple of minutes, and then it just gives you a reward of 1,000 gold or whatever scale of gold you are at, depending on where you are in the story. And that's kind of about it. Or sometimes you'll have a side quest where it'll give you like a side mission, and it'll be tied to the backstory of a character. But again, you don't really have like choices, or you don't have a lot of other influence on that. Or likewise, there's no romance system, or there's not like a friendship system, or any type of system or any reason really to build up a relationship with people. Like even if they rewarded you with like a specific skill that was unique to a character that would only be unlocked by doing like a character side mission, I would love to see stuff like that be incorporated into this game, because that's one of the things I love about games like Fire Emblem or, you know, Valkyria Chronicles or other, you know, strategy role-playing games that do that type of thing. Because again, not every game needs romance. I'm not saying that, but I do think they could have done more with this system a little bit, which is why, like, I really love this game, but I really am excited to see if they do a sequel to this. I would love to see like a DioField Chronicle 2 and kind of turning this into a brand new IP that is like this big franchise. I think that would be really awesome, because I really enjoyed, you know, what I played here in the DioField Chronicle. I think there's a lot of room to grow with the story as well, where the story kind of leaves you. There's a lot of, you know, unanswered questions at that point. And I think they could take the story in some interesting directions after finishing the game. So I honestly really like this game a lot. I think it's definitely a game I would recommend if you like real-time strategy games and, you know, strategy role-playing games. And it's also a type of game that, you know, here on the RPG Cave, I'm going to be talking about it probably in our Game of the Year awards towards the end of the year, because Garrett and I will be recording like an RPG Game of the Year show. And this is one I very much expect to be talking about there. I really, really enjoyed it a lot. And I think you will too if you like strategy role-playing games. But again, a demo is available right now. The save process carries over to the full game. So if you want to play the first chapter and see if this is for you, definitely check out that demo, because if you really like the demo, I think you'll really enjoy the full game. And that's going to do it for my review of the DioField Chronicle. What do you think about this game? Let me know in the comments below. Or likewise, if you have questions about the DioField Chronicle that I haven't answered here, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. I will answer them in the comments. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turfer. You can also find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, on YouTube at youtube.com/Carpool Gaming if you're listening on audio feeds and on podcast services around the globe. So I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the DioField Chronicle in review, and I'm out.
Got it.
Right away.
Here goes! Let's get going.
Understood.